8. Ready? Uh, s- yeah, Second Peter chapter 3, verse 8. Ocho, for the ones that don't speak English. And it goes, you guys ready? But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. So, talking about time, how, you know, for God, when we can kind of interpret it in many different ways, but sometimes we might be praying for something or hoping for something, and for us, it might seem like it's taking too much time, and but everything in God's timing is perfect, and we might not always understand what the timing might be that God has for us. But we for us it might be, oh, why is this taking so long, or why is I haven't seen any change or anything. But with God's timing, it's perfect. And I feel like sometimes when we're trying to maybe figure something out or do a certain project or anything in our lives, as in going to school or maybe in a career or anything. And sometimes we kind of want it now, and we're like asking for it, praying about it. But throughout that time, we're not really, instead of kind of, the saying, where it's not the destination, it's the journey type of thing. But as you're trying to reach that goal, during that process, like as they say, the journey. Are you maturing enough for it? Are you getting ready for it? For example, it's if you're trying to do a marathon, right? So let's say it's in 6 months from now. You're not just gonna be like, oh, I'm just gonna wait till it gets here and then do it. No, what are you gonna do? You're gonna train, right? You're gonna train, and the more you train, the easier it gets for you when you do that. The harder you train, the easier it's gonna get. I mean, because you can be training, but if you're not training as intensely, or you only train like half of the time, you're probably gonna still do it, but you're gonna struggle a lot. If you don't train a lot, you're really gonna struggle, and you probably shouldn't do it by that point. But as you can see, how you wait, or are you like anticipating to get to a certain end for anything, like I said, career, school, or relationships, or anything in general. During the process, like, what are you doing throughout the process? Like I said, time goes by quick, and sometimes we'll be like, oh, I'll do this later, or I'll do this in this other time, and next thing time has passed by, and you haven't done anything. Procrastination, I think that's a thing. All of us, struggle with that at a certain point, where you want to do something, like, oh, I'll do it later, and then that time comes, and then you don't do it. Like a funny way you can kind of think about it is, when you're like a kid, when your mom tells you to take out the chicken from the fridge, oh yeah, I'll do it later, and then your mom shows up and you forget. So I'm trying to take it out, and it's frozen, so you get in trouble for that. I'm saying it because I actually that has happened to me a couple times when I was younger. Like, hey, you don't forget to take out the meat or something, so you can se puede descongelar, unfrozen. And yeah, oh yeah, I'll do it later. And then they're here, or they're gonna be here like in 20 minutes, and you take it out, and you try to like get everything done at that moment, but by that time, you're kind of like, you should have done it before. But like I said, procrastination, it could be a very because in the end, procrastinating is not much of like, oh, you're waiting or you're being patient. No, you're just being lazy, because you could be doing something. You could be integrating anything, in your life to do something, but you're not. You're just procrastinating. You're being lazy. Now, being patient, that's a different way of doing things, because you're actually doing something. Like, for example, something that I'm working with, I wish I could get answers quicker and replies quicker, but sometimes, because like different companies and things like that, they take time to reply to you or to do things, and I might feel like I'm not being patient enough, but it's not really much of me not doing the work, but it's more like outside sources, that take time to do things. But that's where patience comes in. Now, if I wasn't doing anything about it, if I was just kind of like, oh, we'll see when it happens, that's procrastinating, because I'm not putting in the work, because as long as you're putting in the work, I think it's a very self-reliance, where you can kind of determine yourself and be like, hey, I'm actually doing something. I'm actually putting in the work. For example, like I was talking about the marathon. If you're training and you're working hard and everything, when you get there, and you might not be as successful as you might come in last, but at least you come out, at the end. It might not be like, oh, well, next time I'm going to train this way, or next time I'm going to work on my diet. So you'll learn from something from it. You might not win the first place the first time, but then when you want to do another one, you'll maybe understand better like the terrain. Maybe this time I should have, trained more like on incline for going uphill. So but you get to have an idea of what to do and what to work on next, instead of just not even doing anything, and then at the end you don't even do the marathon, or you just kind of quit halfway. You're never gonna know how the whole journey is and stuff. So you won't be able to get better, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, is always do better. But practice and time come with ourselves. Anything with life, we can even in school, if you do your homework, get good grades and all that, you get successful. You're able to get scholarships. You're able to, maybe get into university, et cetera, et cetera. Or, if you're doing a job, even though with a job, sometimes, those can be tricky because of the way people are. You could be putting in a lot of work, and sometimes it might not really be as successful as you think it would be. But then that's what comes with life. As long as you know that you're putting in the work, as long as you know that you're the one that's actually trying, I feel like that's a very good way to keep on, pushing forward, persevering. And how it says here, that for God, one day is like 1,000 years. So, for us, and we might be like, struggling or debating, like, oh, why isn't anything coming the way it should? I keep on doing this, I keep on doing that. But, God's timing is perfect, and He knows what He's doing in order for us to achieve what, we were praying about. And sometimes, what we're praying about or what we want, it's not what God has planned for us. So, we also got to pray about it. We also got to, ask for advice of like, hey, is this decision that I'm doing, or this decision that I'm going to do, is it something that's going to help me, not just, career-wise or, financially, but also, spiritually. Is this like new decision going to help me not be closer to God? Is it going to help me actually get more distant from God? So, all those decisions. And I think as we get older, we start to find ourselves in those dilemmas more frequently, especially when it comes to careers and things like that. When you're younger, you don't really have too much of that, those dilemmas. If anything, it's more like, listening to your parents, making sure you're not lying to your parents, which is, it's also important, but it's stuff that you can kind of resolve within like yourselves and your parents. Once you get older, there are bigger decisions that, now your parents are not, of course, they're going to, help you out. But at the end of the day, it's your decision, because you're older, you're maturing, you're taking different career paths. It might take you to a completely different city, and be sure, like, well, for example, like me, when I would get sent to different states to do all that, being able to decide, if it's going to be long-term, short-term, and is it going to help me or is it not going to help me? Even though, of course, some careers, do tend you to take time away from your family and things like that. But, doing them in a way that is, correctly, telling your parents about it, not just running off and, doing your own thing, try to do everything the right way. So like that, God can bless you. So like that, God can have you in a path that's successful. Not because, if you start off something with lies, if you start off something with deceit and with malintent, it's, at the end of the day, it's not going to really work out for you, especially because, God tells us to listen to our parents and to be, have dignity, integrity, and resilience. How we talked about the fruits of the Spirit. And, if we don't start off in that, at the end of the day, it's probably not going to. And then even though it's easy to sometimes see other people that are, not Christians or not related to in any way, you can kind of say religious or anything like that, and you see them very successful. So it's really easy to see that, I know I see it all the time where it's like, oh man, I'm trying to do everything the right way. I'm trying to do this, and I'm not seeing any improvement. I'm not seeing anything that's helping me. But you see all these other people who lie, who are deceitful, who backstab, and all those things, and you see them being successful. You see them actually like getting better, and you kind of think to yourself like, well, why? Like, if I'm doing everything the right way, and these guys are not doing everything the right way, why are they getting better and stuff? And sometimes we wish we knew and understand why, but it could also be another deceitfulness from the enemy that's trying to, hey, if maybe you start doing bad, you might be doing better. It's really easy to kind of fall into that category of seeing other people doing better than you, or actually not even just doing better, but you're putting in more work, you're putting in more time, more effort, and this other person doesn't really put any time or any effort, but you see them still doing better than you in one way. It does, as we say, mess with your mind. It does kind of have you start having doubts, of like, hey, well, am I even doing it the right way? And it's easy to see that. And then also, if you start talking to maybe other people, it depends on who you talk to and stuff, they can also be disencouraging to you. Oh, like, you go to church and you pray and you do all this thing, and look, it looks like you're not even doing anything better than this other person who does not do anything like that. So, kind of putting that like evil thoughts in your mind, and you're like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't even be going to church. Instead of going to church on all these days that we go, maybe I should use that time and do something else. Maybe that's going to help me actually be better in my career or something like that. So it's easy to feel doubtful, especially when you see other people doing better than you, especially when you're putting the work. And like I was talking about, how time, it's crazy how you don't really think too much of it when you're at the moment, or when you made that decision that you're going to take off in your career or do something. You make that decision at that moment, and then you start putting it in motion. You start actually doing things, going to places and doing all these things. And next thing you know, time has passed, and then you start looking back and you start realizing, did this help me improve, not just like in my career, but also spiritually? Did this actually make it worse? Did this actually help me not get closer? So, and we only see that through time. That's something that you kind of notice, if you actually take into consideration, you stop and think and see what position you are at that moment. Like, for example, right now, it's already been, like I said, a little bit past half the year. And, I've definitely started thinking like, well, what have I done? I feel like we were just in January when we did the first youth event, it didn't feel like too long ago, but it's already been, well, we're in the 8th month, it's already been 7 months. And, I was thinking about that, and I was like, time goes fly. And then especially when you get older, I feel like you got all these things that come into your mind. You got like 1,000 things like, oh, I should do this, I need to do this, I need to pay this, I need to do all these things. And like I said, time goes by quicker. And like I said, now we're in August. So, I started to realize, like, what have I done? What have I improved? Not just maybe with, work and things like that, but also, spiritually, what have you done to improve from when the beginning of the year? Have you read more, or have you tried to, pray more or fast, or, things like that, that usually towards the end of the year when we're here, we always pray and we get together and we talk about how this year we're going to be better, how this year we're going to do more, how this year it's going to, what they say, 2025 is going to be my year. And then, you look at, you're in August, you're like, oh, I guess maybe next year. Because, you haven't done, not that you haven't done, but you just haven't seen like a big change, And, sometimes changes takes time, but I feel like as long as you're putting in the work, you are actually doing something about it, depending on what it is, work, school and stuff, as long as you're actually putting in the work, I feel like in the long run, it's going to pay off. And even though, like I said, time does, it's kind of, I don't know if you guys have had that experience where you feel like, yes, time is going by quick, but then for some things, you feel like it doesn't come quick enough. I feel like it's kind of a very, like psychological type of thing, because, your time is passing, but yeah, there's a goal that you want to reach or something that you want to do, and you feel like it's just not getting any closer. For example, like if you are like for example, me, last week, we went to a concert, and was it last week? Yeah, it was last week. And throughout the year, we're kind of like, oh yeah, we got our tickets, like, hey, it's gonna come, it's gonna be lit, And it came, we went, it's over, and it's like, oh wow, now it's over, But you kind of, it's crazy because you think about like, oh yeah, it's coming up, you get excited, like, oh yeah, it's gonna be cool, we're gonna see this artist and this and that. And like I said, we went, came, we saw, and then that was it. Now it's just like a memory. But the feeling that you get, the excitement, the adrenaline that you're gonna see something and do something. When you see it like ahead of time, you don't think too much of it. You just see that it's getting closer and closer. But once you're there, and then it's over, then you're kind of like, okay, well now what? Now what am I going to be looking forward to? And that's just like a small example. It could be more like career-wise. Let's say you're going to get promoted, and like, oh, I can't wait. They say that I'm going to get the promotion at the end of the year. So, you start, putting in more work, and then your promotion comes, you actually get it. So it's like, well, now what? What's next? You kind of start getting an empty void of like, okay, now, well, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do next? And sometimes some people get to a certain goal, get to a certain end of like their journey, you can say, and then they just stay there. They just stay stalemate. They don't improve or do anything. And let's say how my dad's been talking, about memorizing verses and things like that. Let's say we memorize a couple verses, and we're all right. My goal is to memorize 5 verses half of the year. Let's just say. And you do that, but it's like, okay, I memorize them, and then you stop, but like you should still continue, to do better and to memorize more, using it as a small example. Because it's easy to also, reach your goal and get something done, get that job, graduate, and then you just stay there. It's like, because you work so hard, the marathon, you're training so hard for all these months, you're running, you're watching your what you eat, you're doing all these things. You get there, let's say you do really good on it, so it's kind of like, now what? Do you just stop, or do you continue, or do you prepare for like a longer one? So, you kind of always have to keep on moving forward, like always keep on going forward, and regardless of anything, even with careers, like I said, in school, spiritually, I feel like that's something that should always be improving no matter what. Obviously, as you get older, you start realizing more situations, more people getting involved in your life, and different situations that require different ways to approach them, different perspectives, especially like say if you want to get into relationships and things like that. Proverbs has a lot of verses that help improve that. If you have like doubt and things like that, Psalms has a lot of verses that help you improve. And then if you're kind of hesitant of like, oh, well, why do bad things happen to me if I'm doing good? You could look at King David. He was doing pretty good with Saul, and then towards the end, Saul wanted to kill him, and then he was even David was tripping like, dude, I was helping you out. I killed Goliath. I did all these things, and why do you want to kill me? I haven't done nothing wrong to you. So David also found himself in that position of doing everything right, and at the end of the day, he got the end of the stick and was getting hunted down. And we saw that through his perseverance, he ended up being king. So, there's a lot of stories that we can implement from the Bible into our lives. And, we can even think about Jonah, God giving him a calling. Or sometimes, let's say even something minor, hey, you're going to help out with this or help out with that, and you kind of don't want to do it. So what do? You avoid it. You don't come to church. Maybe you don't answer your phone, you don't reply to text, simple stuff like that. But you can kind of put that into Jonah, God tell him, hey, you gotta go to the city and preach, give him the good news. You can say, and he was like, nah, I don't want to go to that city, I'm good. So what do? He tried to flee, and well, we know the story, he was in the boat, they threw him out, and fish ate him, and then now he had to go. So why wait until something kind of bad happens to you to like kind of listen? We can use that story, as an example and be like, you know what, yeah, instead of, maybe it might not be a fish eating you, but, you might get hit by a car. You might be in a wheelchair now, Hopefully nothing that happens, but, why you want to get into like a point like that where you're kind of like, okay, now I'm going to listen. Now I'm going to do what they wanted me to do, for example. And it's kind of like, just small examples like in church and things like that. But, you might have bigger callings, a bigger calling, let's say, helping out with your family, or your parents might help with something, and it's easy to just kind of ignore them, or it's easy to avoid them. I think we've all been in that position where maybe your parents might need help with something, and you avoid them by what? By not answering, or by showing up late on purpose, and things like that. We've all done stuff like that, and try to the best we can to not be like that. We got to honor our parents. But that's just like a small example, like I said with Jonah, disobedience, you can say. And then again, what happens with Jonah at the end, when he gets the shade that, God put him to shade, and then he takes it away, and what he does, he gets all mad. Like kind of like for us, let's say we get this job that we were trying to get, we pray to God, God gives us a job, and then let's say, the job is not what we thought it was. So we get mad, oh, this job sucks, I should have never done this and stuff. But it's kind of like, sometimes we get not what we asked for. And then sometimes, God gives us all right, like here's this, and see what you think, experience it. You get there, you experience. How many? I mean, oh, I know I've had that, but I mean, the ones that here that have worked and stuff. How many times have you gone to like a job that you think is going to be good? That, oh, you know what, this is going to be great, and when you get there, it's not what you think it is. It's like, oh wow, this is definitely not what I had in mind. And let's just say, and you can use that with many things. You get a car, for example, something as simple as that. Hey, I'm gonna get this car, because that happened to me. I got this car, you're gonna get it, it looks good. Yeah, I'm gonna be, mobbing through the streets, music loud, and you get it, and you're having mechanical problems all the time, or something doesn't work in it, and now you're stuck with this kind of burden. That's happened to me. I'm sure that's happened to some of you. Real quick story with mine is that this was a while back. I saw this car online. From the outside, it looked perfect. I went over there. I think my dad said the story. I bought it, but I did like a kind of like a contract with the guy that I bought it from, saying that if it didn't pass smog, then I could return it. But I mean, in reality, when I did that, I was kind of like, whatever, just so they can. I didn't really care about it. I didn't really care that I did that, but I mean, thank God that I did that. But I didn't care too much about it. I just wanted the car. I get it, and then once I started driving it back home, I started seeing all kinds of problems with it. It was a stick shift, and one of the gears was not going in. And when that happened, I was like, oh, what an idiot, And then I get to town, and then my dad's like, why'd you get that? Like, he's like, well, it looks cool, and he's like, well, I mean, and then I told him what was wrong with the gear, and he was like, dude, like, why'd you do that? Like, why? And we took it to a shop, and the guy's like, yeah, this car is shot. Your son's cooked, return it if you can, because this thing is not good. And, well, that's why, thank God I did that contract with the guy. So I called them, called the shame, like, hey, man, I got to return the car because it didn't work. And, thank God that the guy's like, yeah. I mean, he's like, I kind of feared it wasn't going to work, but maybe you could have fixed it. And, I was able to return it and get my money back. But, that experience was kind of like very impulsive, me just seeing that and like, oh, I'm just going to get it because that's when I had just gone out of high school. So I needed a car, to go to Harnell and do all these things. So in my necessity of wanting a car and needing a car to get around, I, impulsively went and bought this car that was definitely not worth buying at all. And after, believe it or not, but after that, the whole incident, I'm very optimistic when it comes to like, hey, maybe this car might look good, but, look into it more, be more cautious, definitely be more cautious. Just because it looks cool, just because it's like this, that doesn't mean that it's always the right choice. Going back to like other, more bigger decisions, like in jobs and things like that, you might think that it's the right choice because you're impulsively maybe doing it or someone told you to do it. But, sometimes we don't. I think now, especially me, that I get a little older, I try to look a little bit more into what I'm getting myself into. Like if I'm looking at a job, I try to do a little bit more research of like, okay, what kind of this job, how many times is it going to be demanded of me? Is it long hours, or am I going to be, having to travel a lot, use my vehicle? I try to look a little, and then ask people, try to do more research, right? A little bit more cautious instead of just doing something impulsive. Because I think, like I said, I use the example of the car. Some people might be other things. I know some people that are kind of, they could say not financially in the best position, but they want to throw their son's gender reveal. So, they throw a gender reveal party. And we know how much, they, secular, so they buy a bunch of like alcohol and all that stuff. And I think he said that he wasted like $1,500. And that's just for the gender reveal. And then maybe like 4 months or I don't know how many months later, he's like, okay, now we're going to throw a baby shower. So now another $1,500, so that's $3,000 in just that. And then I was talking to him. He's like, "Yeah, man, I'm struggling. I can't pay my car payment. I can't do this." I was like, "Well, dude, you just had these big old parties. Why didn't you just?" He's like, "Well, I know, but I kind of felt like I should." And I was like, "Well, man, if I were you, I'd just kind of prioritize, where you are financially before you do these big financial decisions. It may not always be the best decision, especially if you're doing like in a sense of like impulsiveness, or that's where also comes with the whole marriage thing. Are you guys on the same page? or is like your wife kind of making you guilt trip to like do it, and then it gets a little bit more complicated, but that's where, making our decisions of, obviously who we pick as our partner and things like that, that all comes into play. And, also being patient because, sometimes I feel like, so far not me, but, when people get like desperate, desperate into maybe finding someone or anything like that, they just so they can say that I have someone and they pick someone, and that person's not the best choice. It's easy to kind of be like, well, I'll just pick someone that's that doesn't go to church or something, and you start having issues with that. Well, they don't want to. Well, actually, perfect example. I don't know if you guys have. Remember how I mentioned how one of my coworkers, started going to church more and everything and got baptized? Well, not too long ago, he was telling me, he's like, hey man, now that I did all this, it's like I'm doing good, I'm feeling good, but he's all like, now the problem that I'm having is he has his fiance, and she doesn't want to do nothing with church. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of having that problem now because she wants nothing to do with it. He's like, I invite her to church, I try to bring like Bible studies to the house and things like that, and she wants nothing to do with it. And then I'm like, well, man, you see, obviously, you knew her before you started, going to church and doing all this, but now that you're in this position, now you see how important it is when it comes to like picking, even though, it's, different in your situation. He's like, yeah, man, he's like, now that I think about it, he's like, not that I don't care about her or anything, but yeah, I would have definitely, gone with someone that at least has the same, beliefs as me and stuff. He's like, because now it's going to create problems, and he's all like, and she's already my fiance, so it's kind of like, do I call off the wedding? Or I'm all like, oh man, that's a pretty tough position to be in, man, pretty tough position. I'm all like, I wouldn't want to be in that position, man. So he's all like, yeah, man. So I'm praying, I'm trying to do what I can, and I'm like, yeah, man, do you can, pray about it, obviously when you get the opportunities, talk to her, but don't like, shove it down her throat type of thing. Just, talk to her, in a calm and and pray that God uses you in a way to, to talk to her. But I'm like, at the same time, understand that if it comes to a certain like conclusion that you might have to, just make sure that you do everything in the right way. And of course, seek for guidance and everything, because yeah, I told him that's a very tough position to be in. So, sometimes we find ourselves in certain situations, like I said, that you don't really think you're going to until time passes by. And, time could be our great ally, or time could be our great enemy, in the sense of, you were patient, you waited, you put in the work, and, with time, things do come along like you prayed about, and thank God that they did. Or, you can just be just sloth and procrastination, and time passes by, and, you start seeing all these problems, these financial problems, all these issues that are coming up, and you're like, oh man, maybe if back then when I did have the ability to be financially stable, I didn't take the opportunity to learn how to organize myself and things like that. And now that time has passed, your credit is garbage, so you can't even get a house, you can't even get a car. And those are issues that sometimes we don't really think too much, especially when we're really young. But once you get older and you need to build like your credit and things like that, so you can get a house or you can get a car, because I mean that's just how it is here with the credit. And you blow it, you mess it up during like when you're young, and as you get older, like, oh man, maybe when I was younger I should have been better financially managing my money, or my finances, managing them better. You don't really think about it until time has passed by, and so that's how we could kind of be our enemy in a way, But overall, I think we should, pray, read, seek for guidance, ask our parents, ask, our friends that we know are mature, of course, and, try to get the best advice that we can. Or, like I said, pray, read the word. There's a lot of examples. There's a lot of Bible stories, too, that we can talk about with financials. And there's a plethora of information that we can get off just by reading the Bible. And by a lot of the stories, too. Maybe we find ourselves a lot in similar positions that a lot of the stories that are in the Bible. And, we can always see the outcome or see how they did or what they did to help us in our position. What's going on over there? But, with God's help and guidance, and for us also putting in the work and fasting, praying, we can, see the light at the end of the tunnel, as they say. So with that, I want to conclude. If we can stand up and do a quick prayer.